everyone, I am Simran and I welcome you all to your channel, which is Biology Hub channel. Now, in our previous videos, we have discussed about the asexual reproduction, and the link for those videos I will keep it in the description box. Please do look at it. Now, in today's particular topic, we are going to discuss about the sexual reproduction, and this is part 1 in which we are going to discuss some of the basics of sexual reproduction, and the late details we'll discuss in our upcoming lecture. So do follow this channel, do subscribe the channel, do like and comment. So today we are going to discuss about sexual reproduction. So let's start our today's topic. Now, first of all, we should know that what is basically sexual reproduction. So, sexual reproduction basically involves formation of male and female gametes. Now, in sexual reproduction, we have involvement of your male and female gamete. Okay, now as in asexual reproduction, we have discussed that in asexual reproduction, only one parent is enough to give rise to offspring. But in sexual reproduction, we need two gametes, one from male parent and another from female parent. Now, in some organism, male and female gamete are produced by the same organism. But for sexual reproduction, it's very necessary that you have one male gamete and another female gamete, right? So let's look at the definition once again. So in sexual reproduction, it involves the formation of male and female gametes, right? Either by the same individual. It can happen that the same individual give rise to male as well as female gamete, or by different individual of opposite sex. Means different individual of opposite sex can also give rise to individual male and female gamete, or the same organism can give rise to both male and female gamete. Okay, now in human beings, we all know that the male gamete is produced by the males and female gamete is produced by females. So two opposite sex, they make different gametes. So what happens in sexual reproduction is you have a male gamete, M means male gamete, and you have a female gamete. When these two gametes, when they fuse together, right? When these two gametes will fuse together, they will form the zygote. And this zygote will then grow and form the new organism. Now, this process is also very complex. From zygote to new organism, it's a complex process. In this case also, your embryo forms first, and then there are various stages of development by which the finally new organism comes into existence. Okay, so I hope this would be clear. So let's move on. Now, another is a question, why offspring are not identical to the parents? Now, in asexual reproduction, we know that the offspring is identical to the parent. There are two terms. One is identical and the another is similar. Identical means the offspring would be genetically and morphologically would be very much identical, would be exactly same like the parent. But similar means that the organism would not be exactly like the parent, but it would inherit some of the characters from the parent. And this is what happens in sexual reproduction. So in sexual reproduction, now as I discussed, you have a female gamete and you have a male gamete. Now female gamete is basically a egg, right? And male gamete is a sperm. We are talking about the humans, okay? Now, when these two will fuse together, they will form the zygote. Okay, now this zygote would then form the embryo. Later on, this zygote will form the embryo, and this embryo will then grow, and by the 9-month time period, it will give rise to your new organism, which is an infant in case of human beings, right? So this is how your whole process goes. And because there's involvement of female gamete and male gamete, so the new organism which would be formed, it would not be identical to the parent. This organism, this baby would not be identical to both its parent, but it would acquire some of the characters from the female mother and the male father, and so it will inherit character from them, but it would not be identical to any of the parents. Okay, and this we call as variation, and it comes with every generation, right? So I hope this would be clear. Now we'll move on to our next slide. Now in our next slide we are basically going to talk about the juvenile phase. Now what is juvenile phase? Now juvenile phase is something before acquiring the maturity to reproduce, that period where the organism grow and it doesn't have any capacity to reproduce, that phase is basically your juvenile phase. So all organisms have to reach a certain stage of growth and maturity in their life before they can reproduce sexually. So it is the period where the organism prepare itself, grow enough to become reproductive active, and then this period is known as your juvenile phase. So juvenile phase is that phase where the organism grow and mature to produce, or it can reproduce sexually. That phase is basically your juvenile phase, before the stage where the organism actually becomes reproductively active, right? Now this is what it tells us about the thing which I was discussing about the juvenile phase. Now the same thing happens in plants also. Now we know that from the embryo, a post-embryonic stage occurs where the plumule and the radicle starts growing. Plumule will give rise to a shoot and radicle will give rise to roots. Now after that it will come into a juvenile phase. Okay, and in plants the juvenile phase is also known as the vegetative phase. So before coming to adult phase, it would enter into the juvenile phase, which we also call as the vegetative phase, and then it would be a flower where it would be reproductively active. So you have an embryonic stage, then you have a post embryonic stage, then you have a vegetative phase where the organism is not capable to reproduce, but it's growing enough so that it become reproductively active in the upcoming stages. Now next we are going to talk about little more about this phase. Now after the juvenile phase is reached, after juvenile phase we have another phase which we call as the reproductive phase. Now juvenile phase is the phase where the organism grow enough and matures. After attaining that maturity, the organism enters into the reproductive phase where it can start making the gametes for the reproduction. Okay, so juvenile phase, after the end of juvenile phase, your reproductive phase starts. So this thing you have to keep in mind, that after juvenile phase only the reproductive phase will come, right? So moving on. Now in some plants where flowering occurs more than once, what would you call the interflowering period, juvenile or mature? So it's a question. If suppose a plant, it flowers 2 times a year. Now once the flowers starts coming, it means it's a reproductive phase, right? Now after a particular season the flowers stop coming, and then in another season this flower again starts coming. So what would you call the phase in between? It would be a juvenile phase or it would be a mature phase. Now juvenile phase occurs only once in a lifetime. Okay, so the mid phase between 2 flowering stages would of course be your mature phase. That's why I have underlined it. So I hope you must have got the answer to this question. Now, what are unusual flowering phenomena? There are certain plants which follow different flowering phenomena. Like for example, you have bamboo plant. I know you must have heard about it. You have the bamboo species. So in this, the flower comes only once in their lifetime. So in bamboo species, your flower comes in only once in lifetime, and that too occurs after 50 and 100 years. So after 50 to 100 years, only then the flower will come and it will reproduce, and after that it will die. So a bamboo has a maximum lifespan, as you know, and in this one, the after 50 to 100 years the flowering stage would come. So at that time lot of roots would be there and then it would die. Next is another plant which we call as the Strobilanthus lunthiana. Now this plant or this plant basically occurs in the southernmost part of your India, basically Kerala, Tamil Nadu, all these states, basically the south states, they have this plant particular, and it flowers very well. The scene is very beautiful when they flower. So the another plant which is Strobilanthus lunthiana, it flower once in 12 years. So after 12 years it will flower. So these are some of the, you can say, exemptions where you see unusual flowering phenomena, because it doesn't happen with every plant. It happens with some of the plants which I have discussed. Okay, so now, so I hope you must have got the point and you have understood some of the basics of sexual reproduction. Now in part 2, or we can say the upcoming video, will go into the details of sexual reproduction. So stay tuned and do subscribe to my channel, and take very good care of yourself. And for now, tata, bye bye, take care.